Hey guys, it's Craig Turner-Bullock here from Unleashed Education, and you're watching another Editing Toolbox video. In these videos, Charlotte or I like to share a quick tip, trick or technique to help you with your pet photography editing and make your life a little bit easier. In today's video, I thought that I would go through how I use the color grading tool in Lightroom. This can also be applied to Photoshop as well. It's a tool that you can use really subtly to make a big difference on the toning of your images. If you think about the white balance slider and how you would use the temperature and increase it to increase warmth over the image, that obviously makes a global adjustment to the entire image. But when we use the color grading tools, we can apply different colors, hues, saturation and luminance levels to highlights, shadows or midtones. So it can be a really powerful tool to use. We're going to take a look at a couple of different images today and apply some color grading to both of them in slightly different ways. We go down to the color grading panel in Lightroom here. This used to be called split toning, so it's kind of a similar thing. It's just a little bit more refined in the newer versions of Lightroom than it was with the split toning option. And you've got these three circles. You may have a view where you just see a single circle, and each of those circles relates to shadows, midtones and highlights. I like to just keep this as my default view here with the ability to see all three. Each of the circles represent the color wheel. Outside of the circle you have this gray circle which you can move around. That adjusts the hue. And then you have the central circle here which adjusts the saturation. One thing that I would recommend doing when you're adjusting this wheel is when you move it to the point where you want, hold down shift. That brings up this line and that stops us from straying from that hue. If you don't hold down shift, it will go all over the place. Now when we look at the images, I really want to kind of enhance what's already there. Generally speaking, highlights are warmer than shadows. So normally with highlights, I like to warm those up a little bit and do the opposite with the shadows. And particularly in this image where we have a lot of warm tones anyway from these flowers, which I think are gorse, that's the best way to treat this, I think. So I'm gonna look at these kind of warmer yellows, probably gonna edge slightly to the oranger side of the yellows as well, just to give it a bit of extra kind of richness. I don't want it going neon yellow. So then I'm just gonna hold down shift and I'm increasing this. Usually I will really make very subtle changes. If you start taking it up all the way, you can see how it can get a little bit crazy. So just pulling them back and using these with some kind of subtlety is probably the best way of using them. Okay, and then as I said, shadows are normally cooler. So I'm gonna go onto the blue end of the scale for the shadows. I will pull that down as well, holding shift. And usually with shadows, I find myself using the shadow slider even more subtly than I use on the highlights. Now, once I've done this, if I'm not quite happy with the tone in the shadows or the highlights, you can just change the hue to a point where you're happy. I kind of want it on more of that kind of magenta blue side than I do on the cyan blue, just because of the way that the dog looks. I do think I can maybe push this a bit further, and maybe let's play with this one a bit more too. Yeah, I think let's take it a little bit more into the orangey side. Okay, so that's those. And then midtones adjusts your midtones. So I think of this as a mood enhancer. I often don't actually use the midtone slider, but when I do, I think, what is the mood that I want to convey with this? Do I want it to be a cooler kind of image? Do I want it to be a little bit warmer overall? With something like this, of course, where you've got all of these warm tones naturally, I would definitely want to have a warmer kind of mood in this image. So then again, you can adjust midtones, don't go too crazy. Probably about there, and that's basically what you're doing. You've got these sliders underneath the circles as well. Those adjust the luminance of your adjustments. I don't really ever use those. And then Down here, we also have the blending and the balance. Again, I don't really use those. The blending affects how much the changes blend, and the balance adjusts how much of each it plays on. So if you head this way, it's going to weight your adjustments more to the highlights. If you pull it down, you're going to adjust more to the shadows. So yeah, I generally leave those two things alone. If we switch this off, you can kind of see the difference it's made. It's very subtle, but it has given it a little bit more depth and richness to the tones in here. So let's take a look at this image as well. This is one I haven't fully edited yet, so I've still got the leash in there. If I just reset this, you can see where I started. It was quite a cool, overcast conditions here. I think it was raining a little bit. I think there's a few raindrops that you can see in the image. So I really want to kind of play on that mood in my color grading. Again, thinking about highlights and shadows, I will warm up the highlights. I will cool down the shadows. And I think with the midtones in this one, again, I probably do want to change them on this one. And I want to bring the midtones into that cooler realm as well. As I said, you know, we're thinking about the mood with the midtones, with it being an overcast, kind of cloudy, rainy conditions. I think that the cooler side of the toning here is going to work a little bit better with that. Now, I don't want this one really to go into those magentas, so let's move that slider around a little bit more. And I think that's probably where I would leave it. Again, here's the before and here's the after. So it's just a really powerful tool that you can use to really bring in some mood to your images, to really enhance certain lighting conditions and that sort of thing. As I said, color grading is best used very subtly. It is very easy to overdo it and go overboard with the adjustments that you make on this. If you're not sure if that's happened, the best thing that you can do is step away from your computer for a few minutes and come back to it and check it again. Hopefully that has helped demystify the color grading tool a little bit for you. If you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments section here and I'll be happy to answer. I look forward to seeing you again in another Editing Toolbox video very soon.